Yeah, well, it's turning living beings into corpses.
Corpserations.
The
The
corpserations.
corpserations.
Um, yeah. And we're not supposed to be like that as Christians, especially.
Right.
I mean, we talk about ourselves as reborn in Christ. We live in Christ. He lives in us. We live through Him. So there's this concept that I think is maybe a clash in the sense of that maritime pirate culture really coming up against a Christian mindset that sees people, no matter how successful or renowned they become, we expect them to behave still as living beings, as Christian beings versus brands, which the West doesn't have a very good ability to do at the moment. Um, because it's kind of like celebrities, the new aristocracy. It's a kind of or a new religion, something like this. Um, people don't people find it. I mean, you and I have had conversations about this before. When somebody changes from their assigned role, it makes everybody very nervous. Um, and so, you know, he has his assigned role as an artistic brand, and he's decided, okay, now I have a different assigned role as a Christian.
Right.
What his function becomes then as that jester type within his understanding of Christianity is clashing with his corporate corporate branding.
Well, my sense, Casey's saying corporations rebrand us as products. What is being done to Kanye by the powers that be, or what corporations do to us daily, commoditizing us. Yes.
Hmm.
Um, what is ironic and sad is the reason that the corporations pick up artists like Ye is the corporations are they have to bleed off of living creatures because they're dead
Hmm.
things. The corporations, the corpserations, they find living artists, and this is the danger. I think this is what the one of my friends was saying is like he shouldn't have gone with those Kardashians. He went for the money. So even though
Hmm.
that friend was not saying, he's good as a jester, but he recognized the problem of once you decide to go for the money, as Vox would say, take the ticket. You are
Hmm.
now in their, you have to be their puppet zombie brand, put in perspex and put on a shelf. So
Hmm.
they brand Ye as rapper at one point, and he makes them a lot of money, and they don't want him to stop being that because that brand in their dead vision makes them a lot of money. It doesn't matter that corporations do not in fact make money indefinitely. We were watching some of the tech ones lose money right now.
Yeah.
So this idea that the brand preserves your profit in perpetuity is like totally wrong because it clearly doesn't. But
Hmm.
the corpsing of everyone wants to believe that, like, if we can freeze them right now, they will the golden goose kind of thing, ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. And it's obviously, I mean, it's incredibly hard for people to resist that's one of the things that we've watched in the culture wars happen over and over and over again. I mean, Candace Owen,
Yes.
who's a part of Ye's story right now, just got let go from Daily Wire. That if you risk continuing to be alive, you're going to lose the thing that they gave you to be frozen,
Hmm. Yes.
mummified. They want you
Yes.
mummified and fixed so they can keep making as much money off of you as they possibly can. But the problem is then your art dies and you become worthless. It's ironic that is. I mean, it is true. The more the artists take the ticket and want to, have the fame and the attention and the apparent rewards for their art, the less they're rewarded for their art.
I just thought of Madonna's face that flashed in front of my eyes. Sorry, but
But this is a good counterexample. Go ahead.
Well, it's a good example, right? Because she had a kind of sort of branding phenomenon as the woman who mixes sex and religion,
right?
And then has this, her real name being Madonna Ciccone. It's like she's named after Our Lady. So she has this phenomenal effect on Western culture because she's mixing sex and Catholicism, sex and religion. So she goes through all of these incarnations, but it's the same, like reincarnating the same theme. It's sex and religion, but she can't turn it off because then the brand, it changes. So instead of instead of aging gracefully and kind of going into her golden years in a more enlightened way, she's morbidly transformed herself into a plastic version of her 20-year-old self. I mean, like, everybody who hasn't seen her on Instagram, see her on Instagram, you'll never want to see it again. But
you won't sleep for a little bit. She's actually a really excellent example.
A figurine of Madonna. Yeah, she's become a figurine of herself because she hasn't allowed herself to be living outside of the brand that she created. So she's like completely fused herself with her own corporate identity, and then you see this Borg-like mannerisms on Instagram where you think, oh my god, is someone still in there? Like, but that's the end result of not being able to continue as a human being. And then
well, so we'll contrast it. We can do some of our images now, because I think contrast this with what Kanye did, or Mr. West. I don't know. It's interesting. It's hard having just a one syllable name. It doesn't scan. Where's the second? I think an I am. Kanye seems like an I am to me, and we need the rest of it. So he and Candace back in October, right? It's like ages ago in Ye terms. Back in October, appeared in Paris at the Yeezy runway show, Paris Fashion Week Yeezy runway show, and he and Candace are wearing the White Lives Matter shirts, although they're like black and white. White Lives Matter. And one of the interesting things, everybody's always talking about what's on the back of the shirts, and I've in none of the interviews that I've watched, I can't say that I watch every interview, but I watch all the ones that I'm aware of, nobody's ever asking about what's on the front. Which is, I mean, her shirt has Pope John Paul I, who famously only was Pope for 33 days before he died, and then his shirt, Ye's shirt, has Pope John Paul II, who then had one of the longest reigns and has been canonized. He dies in 2005 and is canonized in 2014. And they both have inscriptions, one in Spanish, right? It's like whatever's going on in this shirt. It's interesting because as far as I know, Ye is not Catholic, but he's got popes on the front. He has Juan Pablo at the bottom of the inscription, and then I should be able to say Spanish better than I can. Seguiremos tu I should have pronounced. We'll follow his example. I want to say it in Latin, right? Seguiremos tu ejemplo. Man, my New Mexico cred's gone. Why is someone from
just lost it forever? You can never go back to New Mexico now.
They'll let me back in. Again, we will follow his example. And of course, the Pope follows Christ's example, and we have White Lives Matter. I mean, one of the deep jokes, most of the time when Ye talks about it, it's like, well, of course, White Lives Matter. And he says his dad thought it was a great joke and things like that because it's true. But the Pope wears white, right? So there's whiteness in a number of layers in this particular art performance, and I really I credit Ye with one, I mean, he's had an interesting affect throughout the different interviews he's been in, and I've been watching that. It's very interesting. But at no point he's just said, "Are you that stupid that you can't figure out there's layers of significance in these labels that I'm trying to show you?" I mean, it's like, what white? Maybe is it baptismal white? Is it, heavenly white? Is it angelic white? No, they're all just assuming that the first thing he's doing, I mean, which he is also doing, which is answering the BLM argument about, how do we do social protest? I am convinced that he is, at no interview that I've heard has he actually unpacked the meaning of those shirts. He's just let it kind of rage around and startle everyone.
Well, no one's asked
him.
And we can comment on this because we're poets constantly playing with the meaning of the words that we're using. And also because we're, in DCR, we're anchoring all of our poetry in the medieval, we're anchoring it in Christendom and the Christian understanding of these terms. So this is a kind of, it might be an example of Ye using anachronistic terminology deliberately to shock everybody, because the language now that we're all speaking is almost like a foreign language. I don't, that's why I said to you, like the pirate tongue that we're speaking now, I hate English because we have no control over the terms. We're being given these categories. When you say white, you get a particular version of what that means. When you say black, it's a particular version of what that means. Christians aren't in control of English right now. So what I'm seeing from what you've just described was Kanye taking control of English with the popes on the front, obviously saying, this is Christian English. You're going to read it in a particular way now. But if you go into the front, you see it through that lens, you're going to read this in a completely different way.
Well, we're not in control of the language. We know we're friends of E. Michael Jones on this show. And Mike had a very interesting interview recently with Unwashed in England, which they ended up talking about white and black and what that means in the English context. But the great thing that Dr. Jones has just published is this big book on the dangers of beauty, and the chapter on English art, the chapter on what the English have done beautifully, is poetry. I mean, that is, and he and the young man in Unwashed, whose name I forgot, and I forgot to make notes. Talk about how the English don't do any other arts. All other arts, the English import their, artists, their architects, their musicians, their, painters. I guess maybe Turner was English, but the great English art. If you want, we've said this before with DCR in our poems, iambic pentameter is what English is. It's the great beauty of our culture. If we have, the Anglo culture. If you don't practice iambic pentameter, you basically are not participating in English beauty, because that's where it lives. And I'm so, whoever's watching this, guys, you've got to get Ye in touch with us. We want to talk poetry with him. We want to talk, I am, right? He does, like, there are moments in his interviews, like one when he's talking with Lex Friedman, and Lex says something, I don't remember what it is, and Ye starts riffing off of the sound, and it's like, oh, that goes together, and then Ye's, he's thinking, I'm a genius. His genius is in this understanding of the rhythms and the sounds of our language. And so people are freaking out over, he's this artist who truly is a word artist put White Lives Matter on the back of a shirt with the Pope on the front, and you haven't asked him why it's in English and Spanish? What are you thinking?